The purpose of our meeting on Town Hall is to get all on the same wavelengths about any questions we have relative to the current Town Hall proposal, so that we can relay that to the Town Hall Building Committee tomorrow evening. I got one written response with questions, and I think I forwarded it to all of you, but if you didn't get it, let me know right now. Did everybody get it? Okay. The first question, the first couple of questions really relate to reducing the footprint of Town Hall to try to bring the complex close to an original budget proposed by the selectmen back in 2018-19 of about 8 million. I think the 8 million figure is off, and I'm not sure what it was back then. And also in that proposal, we were required to put the annex up as a separate building, which reduced the amount of usage in Old Town Hall and increased the size of the addition that was going to be put next to Old Town Hall but not attached. So I'm not sure how to answer that question. Anybody have any thoughts? Okay.
So Sam, sorry, Sam, can I interrupt for 1 second? So are we going to compile all these questions and just have discussion tonight and then bring them before the committee tomorrow night? Is that the plan?
That's the plan, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Trying to make sure that capital budget gets all their questions into the Town Hall Building Committee so
Sure.
that we can possibly get some answers.
Makes sense. Can I just ask one question?
Sure.
The $8 million number, where did that come from? Because I know we've always been talking about 10 million, so 8 million's a lot less than 10.
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, it is the figure, it was, the way the question was worded, was it 8 million question mark?
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So I don't remember an 8 million target being established by the selectmen.
Sam, yeah, there was one.
Sam,
there was definitely a target established by the selectmen. I don't remember. I think it was like 9 million, but I don't remember clearly. It is definitely in their minutes, and they all voted for it, and they voted that it should be funded out of operating expense. So it's all there. They all voted for it, and 3 of the selectmen are still there who voted for it. So you just have to go ask. Maybe Kevin McCarthy has it in his files. I asked him if he's got it. He said, "Yeah, I got it." So.
Okay. So
the last figure I looked back on last time around was a target of 12,500,000.
No, not even close. Not even close.
Ralph, that's what I have in my notes.
I think you have to go to the minutes of the meeting that in fact from the selectmen, which go back to after the failure of the last vote, Kevin called for a vote and specifically they put a number in. And that has to be and what I do see, unfortunately, is that nowhere in any of the charge to the committee, which I did read, you've sent to us, thank you, did I see any of the requirement that it meet the requirements that the selectmen had voted. And so it has to go, you just can't ignore a vote of the selectmen on this thing because it was kind of it was a way to rescue anything going forward by saying we're going to be responsible. But this really feels as though it's a violation of trust when people don't actually honor what they had agreed to in the beginning. So that's really important. Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other memory I have, Sam, is that the 12.5 million was the amount that town that the town voted on when we were asked to either, fund a new town hall or not. So I think that's the number that I recall that failed. And the select board then chose a number that they felt, I'm reading into this, would be acceptable to the town.
Okay,
And Ralph is absolutely on point as far as the select board choosing a number and publicizing it, saying this is what we're shooting for. This is what we're trying to do, is to bring in this project.
that's
to that
kind of
number.
water over the dam for this rendition, isn't it?
Say again? What did you say, Tim?
Michelle, you have a question?
I was just gonna ask, I'm gonna look for those meeting minutes, because it keeps coming up, right? So Ralph, to your point, we should be aware of what was said, what was voted on, because it wasn't in the charge, but that's definitely something that I'll look up and bring to the Town Hall Building Committee, because it's important to know exactly what was said and what was voted on. So thank you for bringing that up. And I will look.
Thank you for looking. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so 20,
Kevin has it in his notes. I know he does. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
But as far as we know, there's no target amount set for this cycle on Town Hall building. Is that correct?
Well, no. If it depends on whether you see that was a commitment or not.
But that was back in 2018-19, right, Ralph?
It was the initiation of the project, the current project, under which the criteria for doing this were supposed to be developed. So it was clearly in relation to the current Town Hall Building Committee's work.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, you can, if you find me incorrect, I'm glad to be corrected, but I am pretty sure that I'm right on that point. I had talked with Kevin maybe a month ago, and he said, I remember it clearly. He said, I have it in my notes. And I remember even hearing it. So my memory is not going to be good enough to tell you what number it was. But the memory of it being there is absolutely true. So.
If I could just offer some.
Yes,
Sorry.
Mark?
So I was there for that meeting with Kevin McCarthy when he was leading that, and it was the 10 million was feels like, smells like, would be great to be. It wasn't, this is the charge. It was really a number that was grabbed out of thin air, and in more of a, it would be great if it was in line with that. And it wasn't 9, and it wasn't 11, and it was 10 because 10 was a whole number. There wasn't really any calculus done behind that to formalize that as a number. It was, the charge was still as a directive to fill the purpose and the characteristics designed to that. And then from that point, do a cost analysis to find out what that would be, and then in turn present it back. The 10 million was just it was 10 million, and it was just it would be great to be that number.
I think that's a big problem then, Mark, because many of us on this board feel, well, I shouldn't say for many of us, for myself, I will say that the proposed town hall renovation that failed because of its high price tag. And there was a concerted effort to assure the town that any new town hall would be at a much lower, more acceptable price point. And I think you'll face the same resistance at the current, I believe it's 12 million that you're at now. And why I say I think we've got a problem here is that you may be designing to a project whose price is too high for the voters to accept. And that the $10 million, I think, was not so much pulled out of thin air, but was considered that, given all the information that we had all received, and I sat on the advisory committee at that time and was very much aware of what was being discussed. I think the feeling then was that 10 million might be the high end of what could be acceptable to the town. So that if you guys have been planning against no number, then you may be heading to another fail vote. And I say that not as a threat, I say that as, whoa, you know, we've already gone through this. We've already rejected a $12 million. And that was after a great deal of PR and persuasion in the community. It was not just summarily dismissed, nor was it, you know, inadequately promoted. And if you recall, it actually passed a town meeting, but failed at the ballot. So I really caution that, and this is what I would say to the Town Hall Building Committee for all of the really thoughtful, hard work that has gone in over the last 3 years, that if we're designing to a number that can't be accepted, we're back again.
But we're designing to a need. We're not designing to a number. We haven't been designing to a number. We're designing to a need. And the need, and right now, the need and the number do not align.
And I would argue that the needs can be scaled back. That with any budget, if you don't have the funding, you've got to reduce the budget to meet the funding. And so some elements which may be considered necessary may still fall off the end of the list because the priority of need is not as high as others. So if the need for ancillary services, which are not part of the core town mission, you might call that a need, and the folks that run those ancillary services might very much feel like it's a need. There are others in town who might feel that's not part of what a town delivers on a daily basis in terms of basic infrastructure and town services. So need is in the eye of the beholder, but the reality is a price point and how much you have to spend.
I'd also like to add on your price point and last time, the proposal last time passed town meeting, but then because it was going to be funded with excluded debt, it went to a town-wide vote, and the proposal to fund with excluded debt was defeated.
That's correct, Sam. That's how I remember it too.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the real question is right now, and Mark, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think right now the proposal that we're looking at is roughly $14 million, and maybe 4 million of that could be funded out of CPC. And that would mean that 10 million would need to be funded out of the operating budget. The discussions I have been involved in regarding financing indicate that the town manager and group don't feel that we should go for excluded debt. So we have to include it within the operating budget. So that if you had 10 million within the operating budget, you're talking about a debt service of just under $800,000 a year, which is about half of the funding that the Capital Stabilization Fund gets. So in my mind, that means you can't do a lot of the projects that will come before capital that people in town want. Now, whether that total figure can be reduced a lot to make it more palatable, I don't know right now. I mean, every time we turn around and try to do something, we shave maybe $400,000 or $500,000 off the total number. And that, in my mind, is not that significant, but I don't know how the rest of you feel. So I'll stop pontificating. I mean, there are a bunch of questions here on a smaller footprint. I'm not sure how you do that without taking some of the functions out of town hall. And remember that a number of new things have been added into town hall. TV 143, emergency management, safe harbor, and so forth, as well as a couple of additional employees for the town. So that's created more space need, according to the requests.
Well, Sam, you really have to ask, because I think that Mike has asked and I have asked, are these really necessary to be incorporated into town hall? What could be located elsewhere, as some of them are now? And more basically, how many more square feet is this potential new building than the old two combined buildings, the combined new and old, new buildings in the new and old building? How much bigger is this in square footage to accommodate these new functions? And emergency management does have a perfectly good spot, as I understand it, on the Deer Hill School right now. And there are others that possibly could, the TV 143 is in the schools. And, you know, we're actually saying, why are we moving all of these things into a new building if in fact they have a home where they are now? And I understand there are disadvantages to their homes, but does it really require that they actually have to go into town hall is the question. And that's the fundamental question, right? You just have
Absolutely.
you have to ask why extra square feet when many of these functions, not all of them, can be elsewhere or are elsewhere today. So, and you do look at the numbers, and I probably put it in my notes that, you know, you've got 1,000 square feet for engineering on the second floor. The second floor is half of its engineering. And you say, my goodness, is that a good use of space? You know, I understand the reasons for a lot of what was done, that it's desirable to have many of these functions on the first floor so everyone could actually do all of the work they needed to do on a regular basis on the first floor. But, you know, it's a huge increase in space for functions which hardly existed before, you know, 10 years ago. It didn't exist at all. And now we've got the largest single space in all of town hall strictly for that. So I look at the whole top floor and I say, good heavens, you know, it's really the town manager, some conference rooms, and engineering. That's not a lot. So, I mean, there are options. I don't know what they are, but there should be some options here. So,
But with all, you know, with all due respect, we also, the town hall building committee was not, we did not decide as a committee and a group what functions should be in town hall, in a renovated town hall. We were given a list of them and charged with fitting them in there. Some coming later than others. And really for us, it was just fitting what we were told to put in there.
I see. Okay.
So it's not, there isn't been a decision on behalf of the town hall building committee to say who should and shouldn't be in there. We've questioned the departments that have been in there, but ultimately it's not up to us. It's under our direction that we're taken to put everybody in there. And you know, the meeting spaces with the meeting spaces, because that was a significant portion of the charge given to us. The fact that there isn't sufficient meeting space in the current town hall. Meetings would be held at various buildings throughout the town on a given night, and many people would be running from one building to another, obviously pre-pandemic like, but that was part of the charge.
Well, regrettably, you got stuck with it. Okay, that's how I see it. Right. That, you know, the criticism comes back to you whether you like it or not. It's too bad. It really is.
Yeah, but I guess the question is, if we really need to reduce the size by moving functions out of the town hall, who is the deciding committee operation board that will push that? we can recommend it. I guess it's going to be the selectmen, but I don't know if they support that or not.
I guess you're just conveying our views. We're not the deciders on that clearly. We're just saying financially, this doesn't look as viable as it should. And that's all there is to this, really.
No, I understand what you're saying,
Yeah,
Ralph.
right. Yeah.
I
We're just trying to say, what can you do, right? Yeah. What we're saying,
Yeah,
what
well-
can you do to make it work? We're not opposing it. I actually think you've got a good design, to be perfectly honest with you. It's the question of how do you make this thing come in at a price that we can afford? That's all.
Yeah.
And Mark and his committee, every one of them, has done terrific work on this, given their charge. I think our discussion really has to go to Chris Senior and to the select board, and it may be best to convey that message tomorrow night, that before we get into any discussion on detail, we need to have a discussion on scope with those. And I believe those are the deciders, those being, when I say the word those, I'm talking about the town manager and I'm talking about the select board, so that Mark and his committee can design to the right scope. He has been given a scope. He and his committee have been given a scope, and they've come through really beautifully. But we know as a capital budget committee that financially this does not work for the town. My opinion. So I say, as a member of the CBC, I feel this does not work for the town financially. Others may disagree. But I think that's our message for the select board tomorrow night, is we need to have a meeting of the minds on the scope. And that's a political calculation, is how much do people feel that the town will afford, that the town will approve at either at a town meeting, if it's not, if it's within the operating budget, or if it goes into excluded debt to the ballot. So do others agree? I mean,
No, that's essentially
Brian and Susan, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree. They are the decision makers, but ultimately the decision makers are the taxpayers. And we have a lot of new people in town and a lot of young people in town, and the schools are still going to command the greatest amount of attention, in my mind. So I just think we have to be realistic. To Sam's point, that we're going to spend half of the capital stabilization fund money over the next, I don't know how many years, Sam, 20? Servicing the debt. What does that do to all the other demands? This sounds a lot like the same conversation we had in 2018. And I know it's great to have a new building and everybody wants to be in the new building, but every building we build, we have to maintain. Every square foot we build, we have to maintain. And if we have other buildings that we can utilize the space and not create more of a maintenance and cost, a demand going forward, I don't know why we don't want to operate that way. It seems fiscally responsible to me.
Brian Host, any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a handful of thoughts. The first is, I drew the short straw. I have to stand up in front of town meeting 3 years ago, and fortunately survived that episode, but it wasn't a very pleasant one. As a committee, we had 4 points that we had issues with at that point in time. 3 of which we presented, at town meeting. As you all remember, we presented them first to the building committee, then ultimately in the paper, and then ultimately at town meeting. The 4 issues, and I'm just jotting this down because I didn't have a chance to pull my notes, but the 4 issues as I recall them were, number one, that the then committee, building committee, had not, looked at the renovation alternative. The second issue was that we didn't actually have a real price. People were pulling things out like generators and air conditioning systems and things that were obviously going to be part of the building when it got built, in order to make that arbitrary $12.5 million number that the selectmen had voted on. Again, this is prior to that project being voted on by the taxpayers. They pulled the 12.5 number out of thin air, and so there was oddity around actually getting to a real number. But it was certainly going to be more than 12.5. And then the third issue was that there was not a financial plan for the funding of capital projects going forward. And then the fourth issue, which I didn't discuss publicly at town meeting because I just didn't really feel it was appropriate, given it was somewhat subjective, but candidly probably the most polarizing of the four issues, was a design that I think most of us on capital budget, just really felt was wildly inefficient. Hallways going in all different directions. I think, Ralph, your favorite term was a rabbit warren. Others described it as a maze. So, as I think about the project that's in front of us today, I keep going back to these same 4 points because I don't really want to move the goalposts. And again, this is just me personally. It is my understanding, and Sam and Mark, you guys can jump in here, but it is my understanding that you guys actually did do some real work to price out the renovation alternative, and that, you made an informed conclusion that did not make sense. On the second point, that being a real price, I am comfortable that, the number we're talking about today, although we may find it to bring sticker shock, I don't feel like it's a shell game of a price where we're being told one thing and it's going to be something different by the time we add the generators and the air conditioning and half a dozen other items that nobody figured out were pulled out just to make the headline number. It feels to me like, we're talking about a real price. The third issue, which is the financial plan, that's not really the purview of the committee, of the town hall building committee. It's much more the town's financial management and leadership. I think there's progress that has been made, but I don't think we have, a really, functioning capital funding strategy yet. We can circle back to that in a minute, but, I think that's still very much a work in progress. And on the last point, which was the design, which is what killed it for me last time around. Others may feel differently. I just didn't want to spend any amount of money on a design that I just didn't think was functional. I'm in a different place this time around. I share the favorable commentary that others on the committee have expressed tonight. I think that the town hall building committee has been fully vindicated in terms of going with a new architect and going with a new owner's project manager. I think the quality of the work is just on a completely different plane relative to what we were looking at the last time around. And so, whatever the price may be, I feel like at least this time we're getting a building that we can be proud of, and an architect who's actually willing to listen to the client, which I didn't feel like we had last time around. So I put all those points out there. Those are sort of the four yardsticks that I'm using in a big picture, just on a personal basis, because that's what we said as the yardsticks 3 years ago. And those are the yardsticks we gave as the explanation as to why we as a committee voted this down. That said, I have been following closely the current process. I've been involved in, I've dialed into many of their meetings. I've interjected where I felt it was absolutely necessary. I've tried to steer clear of doing that where I felt like the committee was going in the right direction in the first place. And there are, there are a few small things that I think are getting ironed out. I have pushed to reduce some square footage. And I think that, there's an exercise putting a price on that just to see how much can be saved and whether or not the trade-off in functionality is justified by that savings. It may or may not be. And there's certainly a lot of push going on with regards to geothermal. We're getting some fairly big numbers in terms of quotes for that option. And I guess just where I am individually is, if we can't get the price of that system down to a point where it's actually justified by the operating cost savings, well, we just won't do it. I mean, I don't think we as a town or we as our committee are probably going to go down the path of spending a huge amount of money for something that doesn't actually deliver energy related cost savings that justify the investment. I mean, there are plenty of places we can invest and get in energy savings and get a really good, financial return. So, but I am hopeful that as we get further into this and we get some people involved that really understand geothermal, the numbers come in more favorably. I believe strongly that that's a likelihood. So those are my thoughts. It's just a random walk. I guess one other observation. I mean, I have toyed in my head with, okay, what could you do to bring this project in at a substantially different number, and it's it's some pretty radical stuff. I mean, I think to really deliver on the operational requirements or at least the requests in terms of what you want in town hall and how you want it to function. I mean, you'd either have to do away with the auditorium space and just turn it into offices and raise the annex, or maybe you take down the whole structure and just build an exact historical replica, but with 4 functioning floors in it, right? A full basement, 2 full floors above ground, and then a third full floor up in the roof line. I mean, there's plenty of volume in that roof line. Anyone that's ever been up there, knows that could have been usable space if that had ever been the plan. That kind of thinking strikes me as more controversial than perhaps the price numbers that are being tossed about tonight. So, but that's the direction you could go if you really got fixated on this $10 million number. I think that's the only way you get, a good product at that number. I think that's it for my thoughts. So it's kind of a lot to throw out there.
No, it's okay. Good thoughts. Anybody else have any other points they'd like to make?
Well, Sam, why don't you go back to, you've actually published a bunch of these points. Do you want to go through them one by one, maybe?
Well, yeah, I don't know if I can certainly do that. A lot of them just target the size of the building and the expense and just drive it down.
Okay.
And I don't think you're going to do that substantially without taking some of the desired functions out of town hall. People do need space to do their job. If you leave the auditorium, which I think Brian's idea of getting rid of that would probably end up with too much opposition. That's my guess, but I don't know that for sure. But I think there'd be a lot of naysayers on that. But I'll run through the questions. I've got 16 of them here, and I'll do it slowly. A lot of them are going to be somewhat repeats, so just bear with me. First one is, with a smaller footprint, can the Town Hall Building Committee bring the new complex closer to an original budget proposed by the selectmen in 2018-19? And the question on the end of that is, was it 8 million? Ralph, you remember that? I don't remember that. I'd have to go back and do some, you know, research. I have 12.5 mil in my head, but
I do think it was 10, but you know, as I say, just find out. That will
Yeah.
exist in some minutes somewhere. So
So,
whatever
so
it is.
Sam, I
I'm
think
happy
you're
to look
both,
at those minutes.
I think you're both right, by the way. I mean, Sam, the 12.5 number in your head was in fact a selectman's vote, but it was prior to the last project going to town meeting and going to the ballot box. You know, that the 5 selectmen set that number somewhere around January, or maybe it was December, you know, prior to that town meeting. And also instructed the committee that they couldn't have any people in the second floor of Old Town Hall.
it's a totally separate building.
Yeah, so your 12.5 recollection is real, but that I think it was, you know, it was prior to the last project being voted on. You know, the 10 that, you know, the conversation that Ralph's referring to, which Mark seems to remember vividly, you know, happened after that project was voted down at the ballot box, and, you know, some soul searching was done, and some you know, some thinking with the benefit of hindsight, I think is what brought that, you know, that around.
The next question I have is, can we plan for just the traditional essential services we need to run town hall and fit a smaller footprint? Well, tell me what we're going to take out of town hall, and then we can figure out how much area we can reduce, and that'll answer that question. Can we rely on a percentage of remote workers? I can't answer that question, but we're certainly learning how to work remotely now. Should we ask the town manager to indicate a financial plan for each plan version? We can certainly do that. Has the town hall building committee factored in the town needs for other near-term large capital projects for safety, schools, and library? I think the answer to that is probably no. In my attendance at town hall building committee, there haven't been much talk about other projects. What's the town manager's proposal to fund the project at the current price? Well, if I understand it, it's to fund it out of the operating budget through the capital stabilization fund. I could be wrong on that, but that's what my understanding is. What would the funding plan look like if we fund the project at the original budgeted price? I assume that means the $8 million. I don't know.
Whatever it was, be it 8 or 10, what would that financial obligation look like?
Well, the financial obligation's pretty easy to figure out. The question on
What would the difference be between
what would the actual
14 million or I'm sorry, we said the whole project is 14 with an assumption of 4 million coming out of CBC, so that the town would be funding 10 million.
That one I've projected out, Mike. And it's
At
like
800,000 per year.
70-odd thousand dollars.
So this question goes to, what would the financial hit to the town be each year if instead of a $14 million price, the price was somewhere, instead of a 14 million price, of which 10 million the town is obligated to, the building came in at whatever the original budget charge was, whether it was 8 or 10, with 4 million assumed to come from capital budget, how much would the town be funding each year, and for how long at the lower number? Does that make sense?
Well, here's what I can tell you, because I've run the numbers on it. If you do 10 million at 3% for 20 years, I think it's $780,000 of debt service a year. If you extended that out to 30 years, same interest, you'd be talking about approximately $550,000 of debt service a year. So that would be the impact within the operating budget that you would add on to it.
And Sam, this question you're on now asks you to do the same analysis, but at a lower price.
Yeah, that can be done.
I'm sure. I was just wondering, what would the difference be to the town?
Well, I
So
can't tell you
if
right
the town
now.
were obliged for, say, an $8 million contribution or a $7 million contribution, what would that look like in terms of covering the debt service each year, and for how long?
Well,
So,
here's
so Michael, I mean,
rough-
you're basically talking about, 6 million coming out of the operating budget versus 10 million, right? When you look at it on a net basis, assume CPC is in for 4 million either way, right? So $14 million project minus 4 from CPC is 10 to us, right? A $10 million project minus 4 from CPC is 6 to us, which is 60% of Sam's $10 million case. So if your numbers are 780 and 550, your numbers are going to be more like, 480 and 350.
And
Right.
that, I think, would make a difference to Capital Budget Committee in trying to balance all the demands on the stabilization fund.
Sure.
And that's what I was trying to get at with this
Yep.
question.
Yep.
By funding a lower cost building, it's a no-brainer, but I was just asking the question straight up.
So it's about a
We would have
$200,000
more
swing.
room
if you-
each year for other needs, is really where I'm going with that question.
Right. So I'm just, again, I'm just doing mental math. This isn't surgical, but it looks like it's, over 20 years, it's about a $300,000 swing, right? The difference between the two in terms of the annual P&I. And over 30 years, it's probably a $200,000 swing annually. Just really, really crude math.
Yeah, but it gives you enough to get in the ballpark. Well, here's the next question, which also relates. Will new taxes beyond 2.5% be called for? It depends what you do within the operating budget.
Right.
If you don't add more people into town hall, and if you're very fiscally prudent, you can probably do it without raising taxes. But I can't really answer that question because I don't think we have as fiscally a disciplined management as I'd like to see. That's my opinion. I don't know how the rest of you feel.
I think that's probably true, Sam. We don't have a lot of fiscal discipline at all. You know how much we increase our actual spending every year, which is a lot, well over Prop 2.5, and all of it goes, every bit of it, and we add more every year. We're up at 4% per year spending. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And we're just lucky we can continue to do that, but we're not saving. Maybe some goes into the reserve funds. A couple of million goes into our stabilization fund. But as you can see, that's not going to cover things going forward. Just isn't.
Yeah.
As we are now. So the question is, where's the discipline going to come from? I suppose we ought to be absolutely forthright and frank and say, we can't afford the rate of spending and the capital that we're talking about unless something changes. That's really what the truth is. Yeah. So.
Well, maybe Lee can relay this to the advisory committee. Since they seem to have maybe a little more say in the annual budget.
can I speak just for a second? Are you all aware that we had a free cash of $2,300,000 last year? Are you all aware of that?
I didn't know it was that much. I thought it was just over $1 million.
$2.3 million. Are we overtaxed? Yes.
The next question I have is the town, and I think this refers to the capital stabilization fund. Will that be relied on each year to fund this project? I would believe so if it's within the operating budget. I mean, it's a capital item, and the capital stabilization fund will provide the funding for capital items, whether it's financed, whether it's bonded, or whether it's paid for in cash.
So Sam, with the other large projects that we know are on the horizon, we could either, go out to the public and ask them to, vote the excluded debt now, or we're going to be doing it later.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my only solution, if you want to go excluded debt, you got to tie it into whatever you're doing at the schools, because that'll probably pass a vote on excluded debt.
That's true.
Just politically. I don't think there's any appetite to take the town hall project on excluded debt again. That's my guess.
There's some feeling if excluded debt is used for the schools, it will feel like a little bit of a shell game here. So,
Well, it is, Ralph. It absolutely is a shell game.
right.
But you're appealing to the emotions of parents who have kids in schools, and they'll vote for anything that's going to improve the schools. We've seen it in the past. I don't think it's going to change.
Well, that's true, but you're also, by depleting the capital stabilization fund for this project, you're forcing that.
Yeah.
My instinct is that the school projects that, we're going to see going forward are of a size that, require them to be excluded regardless. There's no way to fit them back in the operating budget. Almost independent of anything that, we do here on any other project.
Yeah, you very well be right, Brian.
I mean, the one exception might be the roofs. I mean, you might be able to fit the roofs, but in terms of a new school building, it's not a $14 million project. It's 3 times that much minimum just for one building.
Yeah. And then we have police and fire station on the horizon.
Right. So last week, I spent a bunch of time going through the 10-year capital plan as well as the capital stabilization fund analysis. And some interesting things jumped out of that that I think are relevant for this discussion. The first is, in my earlier comments, I alluded to the fact that the financial plan is, still very much a work in process. What I meant by that is that despite the fact that we have a very large amount of capital available to spend this year, that the requests exceeded quite materially, and the same is true next year and the year after and the year after. And in that plan as it stands, there are assumptions that we're going to bond things that don't fit in the cash available to us in each of those years, and we pretty quickly build up a pretty sizable obligation for principal and interest. My recollection was that 2 years out, we get up to a number that's somewhere in the area of $1.1, $1.2 million before you layer in town hall. And then when you layer in, what in that model is a $6 million assumption for town hall, being funded, but by us, by out of the capital stabilization fund, the other 4 million coming out of CPC, which, is probably the wrong number, but just using that number, it added another, 400 and some odd thousand in principal and interest annually, but which brought us up to about 1.6. And, given that our appropriation annually is just a little bit over $2 million, 2 years from now, sort of, by bonding all these things, you're at a point where, you get 2 million in, but you only actually have 400,000 to actually spend on capital items in that given year, because you've already got a $1.6 million debt obligation in terms of annual principal and interest. And obviously, there's an expectation we're going to spend more than 400,000 in that year. So, lo and behold, we, start running down the fund balance until it goes zero and then negative. So I'm not really sure what this model was supposed to do. It's certainly not a plan that we can, follow, or a path that we can follow. I think it certainly does capture the and present the reality of bonding things year after year, as opposed to living within our means and paying cash for items out of our appropriation. But what became clear to me is really the following summary. We can cover town hall out of the capital stabilization fund if we're given a $2 million plus annual appropriation, right? Whether the number's 350 or 550 or even 600, we can cover that out of a $2 million appropriation. It still leaves us a lot of money each year, including sufficient funds to cover some large projects. I mean, we could do $1 million project and still have a few $100,000 left over for smaller stuff. In that context, right? But the key to making this town hall funding work is not bonding a whole bunch of smaller stuff year after year just because we want it a year or two faster than we have cash to pay for it. There really has to be an understanding and a commitment and a buy-in, by the administration and the Board of Selectmen to flatten the curve in terms of these capital requests that we're being pressured to fund with bonds. Because you layer in all this principal and interest commitment years in advance, you just don't have the money to spend in those future years. So we could make town hall fit, but we can't do it if we're bonding every other thing in sight. I mean, we just have to slow down the spend across all the other departments, and candidly, that probably puts us more in line with needs as opposed to wants. Because not all this stuff has to happen, in the year that it's sitting in our capital plan. So that was kind of what my takeaway was. After really, spending a couple of days going through those models. The other thing I'd tell you is that there's really not a lot in those models assumed in terms of third-party funding, offsetting some of these capital requests. And I know just, this year alone, for example, CPC has stepped up for a big chunk of the track. I think 375 out of the 500. We've got a boat ramp in our capital plan, and my understanding is that'll be almost entirely a Seaport grant, not debt, but an actual grant. The balance will come out of CPC. And there are, more examples of that going forward. So, this model is just very rough right now, and it's not a plan by any means, but it is telling us something. And what it's telling us is, if we live within our capital appropriation each year and don't pile on a bunch of debt unnecessarily, we could preserve room for a big project like this.
I mean, those points are very well taken. The question is there political will on the part of both the town manager and the select board to follow that advice? Is that a reality?
I guess my feeling is if they want their town hall, they don't have much choice.
So how do we convey that message?
Politely?
Effectively. and have it, it's got to stick for how many X years while the capital stabilization budget underwrites the town hall project for X, whatever those years are. So that's a commitment that I don't know how you do that. Is that a piece of paper that they sign? Some kind of contract? And Lee's shaking his head, looking at me like, you know, what are you talking about?
No, it's a good question, Mike. Because, you know, the fact of the matter is that the composition of that board will change.
Mm-hmm.
And
right, but if there is I may be totally wrong, and I certainly feel out of my depth, but if there's some kind of document, some kind of codicil that says this project will be funded out of the Capital Stabilization Fund, and that the select board in whatever incarnation shall not exceed X dollars per year or X percentage per year in order to make this town hall building project a reality. And Lee is again shaking his head and smiling at me.
Well, I'd say good luck getting him to sign off and
Yeah,
seal it in blood.
right.
You know, they're going to play politics with it.
But very good advice, Brian. Thanks.
We can
Ralph, you were
certainly
selected
try.
once, and Lee, you were as well. What are your thoughts?
Well, the number one thing is, who is the town manager, to be perfectly honest with you, and what are they recommending along with the financial director? That's what it comes down to. They have enormous power. The selectmen generally will review what they do, but given the fact that years ago when we became, instead of an executive secretary and we had an advisory board that did financial management, we changed over to a town manager and said that the selectmen are policy only. That's what it reads today. So today we have a policy board, but we don't have a financial board any longer, although the advisory committee used to be the financial board and actually brought the town forward the budget. It was, at that time, it was well run, it was conservative, it was frugal. Maybe people thought it was too frugal, but that's the way it worked. Today, almost all the power rests in the hands of the town manager to do as he or she wishes. And the selectmen as policy, as a policy board, generally approve with certainly some reservations, what he recommends. And that's the way it works. So if you want to get at the spending, you have to say to the town manager, we want this to be a more responsible town in the way it spends money, to stop hiring people that are not absolutely necessary for its operation, and to make an adequate amount of set aside for capital needs going forward, which probably is in the order of maybe $3 million a year, which is a small fraction, quite frankly, of the 50 million which the town brings in every year. So it is not a very big percentage of the current available funds, as Lee has said, in the town. So the only way that you get at this is you have to be, and maybe the selectmen have to say to the town manager, we want this to be more frugal. And that's probably the only way you get at this. Otherwise, the spending will go on apace, as it has for some time now, at really extraordinary levels. And when you ask yourself, how did that all happen? It really happened because we changed our form of government. And that's what happened. And we took away the kind of power the people had and handed it off to the town manager almost exclusively. And everybody else simply was a, what would I call a rubber stamp, basically. That's what's happened. So, you know, that's the background of this whole thing. And having been on a committee that tried to get this more straightened away, we never really could get it straightened away again. After we made that momentous decision to take away all the power from the people, which is what we've done. We left it in one person's hands. That's where we are.
Well, the
there-
question is, understand how we got here. What are we going to do about it?
Well, that you know where the pressure point has to be, right?
Yeah,
It has to be the selectmen too. They have to agree that this is the right thing to do. I don't know whether they're prepared to be that. I don't think, to be perfectly honest with you, most of them are prepared to be tougher on budget matters, to be honest with you. And if you want to sort of remember going back 5, 6, 7 years, presentations at town meeting were very detailed as to how the budget was put together.
yeah.
Today we get a nice bar chart or a circular chart, and they walk away and say, this is what it is. Here are the broad levels, here are the broad areas where we spend money, but no detail. So today, not even the town meeting has any facts with which to actually contend or contest what is actually going on. It's really true. The big, huge changes, huge.
Well, what should our message to the town hall building committee be? Stop?
No, just look hard at the issues we've raised. That's all. Just please take a hard look. That's all we can ask. What else can you ask?
And at the same time, go to the selectmen and express our displeasure over financial management?
I think that's fair. I think that's fair, given the fact that the capital budget committee is going to get squeezed badly, and capital projects in the town will all have to go to some kind of override at some point, the way we're looking at it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, if you don't face the facts at this point, when you have a chance, we have an opportunity to actually maybe get a little bit more frugal if we want to. Let's do it now.
I mean, you can argue about all the little individual items in the 10-year plan, but the bigger point that I think it brings out is that there's going to be demand for more money than we're going to have available to be able to fill that demand. Very simply, unless you did, an override or increase taxes or do whatever. So
I have a couple of suggestions, and they're half formed, so take it for what it's worth. One suggestion would be that the Capital Budget Committee can accept the Town Hall Building Committee proposal as written with the following caveats. Spending on other capital budget items must not exceed X dollars per year or X percent per year, and give our reason for that, which is the town is increasing its spending at a rate that is unsustainable and must be brought under control. And the other points that Brian has made tonight as well should be brought in there, and Sam and Ralph have all made, in terms of where we need to bring the spending under control in order to go forward with Town Hall Building Committee, Town Hall Building proposal. That would be a positive way of approaching this. Another way to approach it would be to ask the Select Board for time on the Town Hall agenda. Ask for time on the town meeting agenda to deliver a report to the town without even bringing in the Town Hall proposal. And we would share with the Select Board ahead of town meeting what the content of our message is. And our message is that the town is overspending, that the town's expectations are unrealistic, and that we need to bring our spending down dramatically. and present our view to the town in a formal way at town meeting. So those are a couple of ideas to try and get our message through in a serious and hopefully positive way.
Well, I think we have to be positive. I don't want to be negative because
Mhm.
that has too many
Yeah, no, you
bad
need to be
implications.
positive. You truly
Yep.
do. You need to move forward, not tear down.
I agree with you, Mike. I would add in that Lee should really jump in. It has always been the prerogative of the advisory board to actually bring those messages forward. And we could do it jointly with them as well, if they're willing to do it. But I don't have a good idea right now of the composition of the advisory board as to whether or not they would go with these. But anyway, that would be that'd be the best way. Then you'd have the
Well,
two major boards.
Lee Jenkins is on the call, who's a member of advisory, so maybe he can chime in and give us an idea of their appetite for doing something like this.
There's so many new members on the board. I really don't know what appetite they've had. We haven't even discussed this. This has not come up, but I'll definitely pass on what your concerns are to them.
And just to follow up on my idea, perhaps what we do is we bring this proposal to advisory in a joint meeting to say, here's a message that we would like to share with you and get your reaction and see if you agree with us. It would be incumbent on us to come up with numbers that are defensible on where the 5 or 10 year budget plan goes and the impacts of a town hall, of a public safety building, of school infrastructure, whether that's a new building or renovation, and the other major items that we are aware of at this time.
I think that's a very good idea.
Who knows what's going on with other departments too, but maybe that's where we start. If we feel that our goal is to present to the town at town meeting our views on 2021, the town is at a crossroads. We can choose to spend as we have and find ourselves in deep water in a short time, or we can bring it in at this point so that we can take on important projects like town hall, like public safety, like the schools, but it has to be within constraints. And that the schools and the town alike need to bring their spending down below 2.5% in order to make these other major spends possible in the future.
Right, so I think that's a very positive message. It's saying basically, we can get this done. We can get town hall done at the right number and not, damage our ability to fund what we need to do going forward if we have some financial discipline.
A lot of discipline.
Right, but so the point is, we're not trying to crush the project. We're trying to put the project, in a light that makes sense for the town in the long term, because this is a long-term project. So we have to be sending the message, or maybe not even the message. I guess what you're really doing is educating the public and the town, how we have to behave for a chunk of time here while we get this project funded. And beyond, when the other big ones come right behind it. So I see this as a good opportunity to, Ralph was talking about the change that maybe we're a little more fiscally responsible and we lost a little bit of that. This is a good opportunity to bring that all back.
Right. Right. Well, Mark, we've run the gamut on you. We've gone full circle.
I could have hung up.
Yeah.
You've been listening.
You
You
know,
have any questions of us or?
No, I mean, I think, some of you have jumped into our meetings here and there. Certainly Brian's been there for a handful of them. And, we really designed something, put something together here that followed the charge that we were given. Again, part of that was, we're renovating a large footprint of auditorium space that isn't fundamentally being programmed for office space and use beyond the historical fact that it's been an auditorium and that's what we're going to maintain it. So there's a big chunk of space there. Any reductions to square footage in small tweaks here and there aren't going to be large dollars in terms of they're not the expensive square footage. They're not the mechanical equipment. They're not the elevators, the stairs. They're the cheaper of the square footage that we've got in the equation. But, just going through that town hall, I mean, it's certainly something that I think if we ignore, we're being irresponsible by ignoring it, because we're going to have systems that are going to fail beyond. I already know we have some things that are Mickey Mouse together because parts are no longer available, and things are going to become increasingly harder and harder for us to fix them. And then quite frankly, they won't even be fixed right because it's just not an option. But just, I also see it as something that the town will benefit from. I mean, just going through the common this past weekend, seeing all the families out there on the common, having lunch. It'd be great to have the town have a bathroom that could support that kind of activity out there. And just you see the farmers markets that'll be coming back on hopefully Thursday nights here, and it's something that I think the town will benefit from, even the people that aren't going in there to pay their taxes. It's just a little 2 cents there, but I think if we don't do it, we're just kicking a can down the road another couple of years, and it's not going to get any cheaper to build. I mean, the whole construction cost was roughly around 10 million for the construction costs, and there was another 4 million of soft costs that come with the program. But to get a building like that for much less than 10 million is a far cry.
Any capital thoughts?
Well, maybe shifting gears a little bit. It sounds like we have a lot of work to somehow institutionalize, first educate, and then institutionalize financial discipline. If we don't do that, and we put this project, into the capital appropriation and fund it out of the fund, without institutionalizing the discipline on all the other stuff, you're basically putting the town on a path to an override in a very, very short period of time. And it's completely mathematical, it's completely predictable, and it's completely insured. So I do think we need to do that. But it doesn't seem to me that that's going to get done in the next 2 weeks, which is kind of, the critical path for this next hurdle, right? Which is our annual town meeting. And so I think that, I think perhaps a shorter term issue that we all need to shift focus onto is, the ask at this annual town meeting, and, whether we're willing to support that, or ready to support that, recognizing that nobody's asking for the construction dollars today. It gives us time to advance the design, tighten the cost estimates, and, parallel path with that work being done by the building committee. It gives us time to work with the Board of Selectmen and the administration to tighten perhaps the financial discipline, prior to having to vote on construction dollars. So I just curious what people's thoughts are on that. I don't think the building committee at this point has made a decision, a hard and fast decision as to whether they're going to ask for money just to finish the design, okay, between now and special town meeting, and then at special town meeting, seek the funding required to prepare the bid documents, run the RFP, get the proposals back, and come back at next annual town meeting with bids in hand in a, sort of a final number. I don't know if they're planning a 2-step process or whether they're planning I guess it's a 3-step process, or if they're planning a 2-step process where, they ask for funds to get us from here through to next annual town meeting, which would not only include the design work, but also include, the bid docs and the process of running the bid and coming back with the final number. I think reasonable people can come down in different places on this. I'm always more in favor of an incremental approach, but it's possible that other people go a different direction on this. I'm just curious how people feel about what the two possibilities that will be, one of which will be asked of us in the next in the next few weeks.
Any other thoughts?
So let me ask you, Brian, are you basically asking us at this point how we would vote?
I don't know. I'm asking you to think about how we layer in the timing of the different things that need to happen, right? When do you need a commitment out of the selectmen and the town manager, for example, on the financial discipline side? Does that have to be done before we fund the next several months of design work on what I think we all agree to be a fairly good design? Or is that something that can go on parallel path, but absolutely prior to funding the construction number?
I guess
And that's what I think I'm asking people. How do you feel about interleaving the timing?
I would want to know if it's at all possible to reduce the cost of the building first. And if what Mark is saying is there ain't much that we can reduce because the mechanical costs are X and won't change, then, it almost feels like take it or leave it. But if there is a way to reduce the cost of the building, I think it would be a very smart move to get the cost down before it goes before the town again. And if that means, and I'm not saying throw out wholesale all of the planning that's gone in, because so much good thought has gone into it. But if that means taking out the what we are calling non-essential, and I know it's not acceptable to say this, but Safe Harbor and 143 and the emergency management, whatever is extraneous to the actual running of the town, if those can be reduced, and if we can plan for 33% remote work as a standard for the town in order to reduce the overall square footage and reduce the overall cost, I think that needs to be done first. That needs to be demonstrated. And it's asking a lot of this, not only of the town hall building committee, but the owner's project manager and the architect. And it's going to cost more money because we're asking now for, give us an option. But right now, and Mark, please correct me if I'm wrong, right now there are no other options. We're just going with this one concept, correct? It's not like we've got a lower price option that you've designed out with the architect.
No, there haven't been other series of options. We programmed it. We went through the programming. We had a list of everybody that had to be in there.
Right.
We used that to design. I mean, I don't know who's non-essential in the equation, but I mean, Safe Harbor, 143 TV, and the emergency management isn't going to save $3 million. Now we're
No,
going to
but
save $2 million.
I want to know, how much can we save? How much can we get this cost down by reducing the number of people in town hall?
And get it down to what? That's the question.
Whatever.
Down
I
to.
want to know the number. I'd appreciate knowing the number.
But we don't know what we're getting to. We don't know what we don't know who's considered non-essential. We don't know what number we're trying to get to.
And
We're just told it needs to be less than it is.
Yeah,
I
but
think our question should be posed to Chris Senior and to the select board for them to provide you with the scope as an option, as an alternate approach, to say, we are not going to take all these groups in that have not been here before. We're going to continue providing space for the people that were here to begin with. And the other groups will remain where they are in order to save money on this project, because we're being advised, select board is being advised by a capital budget that the number is high. And we're looking for a way to get it down and let them deliver the charge to you with, and that would be what we'd advocate. What we would advocate is, we advocate finding another approach that would reduce the cost, and tell us by how much.
so is our question really not necessarily to the town hall building committee, but to
I think so.
town manager and the board of selectmen? What functions can we take out of this proposed town hall? And see what those are, how much that might reduce the cost, and go forward from there.
Right. And to Ralph's point, how do you justify the square footage devoted to engineering? And to ask the specific question, can we start planning for a 30 or 35% remote workforce as a matter of course?
Yeah.
And it may be totally impractical, but we are at least raising the question.
And Mike, I'm not saying that's not a valid question, but that's not for the town hall building committee to address and to answer.
I agree.
Well, I agree with that.
No,
So-
I absolutely do too.
But these aren't questions that we haven't asked, but we can't continue to chase our tail there. We need a direction and need to follow it.
Right. So
I don't think, I don't think anybody has a crystal ball here to understand exactly how the working remotely is going to work a year, 2 years from now.
okay, that's fair too. But you're absolutely right. No, our question is not for the town hall building committee at all. No, it's to the town manager and to the select board.
And what we're trying to focus on is how can we best as a committee answer the question as it's currently designed and currently programmed, and currently address any questions that this committee has. And we'll take those questions that's specific to our purview here and address those as a group.
Right. I think the only question I can think of, and people please add anything else you can think of. It's Ralph's point on the amount of space allocated for engineering. And I myself have not looked at it. So Ralph, I'm relying on your wisdom. Justify that amount of space for that particular program.
Yeah, I think that the key on that, Mike, would be that we don't have dimensions. All we have is room areas. So it's very hard to figure it out, in fact, why that has happened. But about half of the second floor is devoted to what is now called engineering. I know there may be one other function in there, but it's really a huge space. Maybe Mark can speak to that, but it's really extraordinarily large. As you go up to the second floor and you look in as if you were coming in on the front door, and you go upstairs, you'll find almost the entire right-hand side of the building, from the center of the building to the right is devoted to that. Maybe one or two other functions up there, but it's an enormous space, just enormous. And yet we've probably crowded quite a few things in the first floor, maybe for good reason. I understand why you might want to be able to do business with all of the major town functions that you have some reason to have business with. But in fact, it looks as though it's an inefficient use of space. So anyway, it's the best I can say. But you do need dimensions. There are no dimensions, so we can't even tell about massing. We can't tell about anything because we have no dimensions at all. So this time.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. We'll take a look at the plans, and typically in this phase of construction, we wouldn't have dimensions on the drawings like that, but we could probably have them put some rough dimensions there to give some kind of perception of how large
Okay,
the space.
that'd be appreciated. So it's not a
so-
gift so much in my part, just by adding up, the required amount of space by virtue of someone's request for area, which is what's happened here. So
And it's not a town hall building committee function. It's really the selectman and town manager requesting
Yep.
these various functions. And
Yep.
can you move them out and put them somewhere else? How necessary are they?
that's right. Where do they logically belong? In other words, really.
No, that's true.
It's because some of this is not logically in town hall.
So quick question for Mark and Michelle that just, perhaps might clarify, this engineering square footage number. How many people are actually going in that department, and who are they as we think of them?
So I believe, I don't have the plan in front of me, but I believe that space houses Brian Joyce, Nick Berardi, myself. Let me give you positions because that's probably better.
Okay.
So the DPW director, facilities director, myself procurement, sewer admin. There's a transitory workspace in there for the interns that come in and out. And there was a 6th spot there for Jason Federico, which I believe now is moving strictly to the water department. So his position will no longer be in that space.
Okay, so somewhere between 6 and 7 people. And then you also, as I understand it, have an engineering focused sort of copy center in there. Is that?
That's true.
Okay.
So we have a large plotter printer that requires a tremendous amount of space. Right now in Brian Joyce's office, it's himself and this printer. It takes up quite a bit of space.
So Ralph, I don't know if that helps, but obviously the answer is a lot more than just Brian Joyce.
Yeah, of course you'd have to ask, are all those functions really necessary to be there? So there's really quite a bit of stuff. For example, now we've moved facilities there. I think maybe even facilities and an assistant. In other words, we moved an awful lot of people out of where they are now and where they more logically belong and move them over. Even DPW, you have to really ask yourself, why isn't DPW associated with DPW? It's really completely removed from it. I mean, there's just a lot of sort of fundamental questions about the thinking about how do you run an operation when the managers of the operations aren't close to the actual operation being done. It's really a very odd structure. But that's really so fundamental that I don't even know how to get at it. It's so tough. It looks so illogical to me, so much of it. So
Well, it's an organizational structure that said, I have to have all my managers instantly available to me in the same place.
yeah,
And that may, it's a highly centralized situation when maybe it should be decentralized.
you're exactly right, Sam. It is. We have become centralized where we used to be decentralized. That's absolutely right. Yep.
And we functioned using remote tools like Zoom in the last year, and shown that we can function effectively as a decentralized group. It doesn't matter that you're in the
You're
same
fading
room.
out, Mike.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah,
Okay. I just made the point that we function well in a decentralized fashion using the virtual meeting tools. The other question I would have is an intern in the space might be nice, but certainly not essential. So can we pare down the number of people anywhere across the board in order to reduce the overall size and cost?
yeah,
It's the
that's,
same points we keep making. But that it all goes to the select board, and it goes to first to the town manager with a select board approval, and not to the town hall building committee. The town hall building committee would help us by with direction from the select board and town manager coming up with an option of a smaller building. But that would be on the town hall, that would be on the town manager and the select board to direct them that way.
well, I think the next step is we need to go before the Board of Selectmen and explain our thinking to them.
Agreed.
Because I
And the
think
advisory
any
committee.
other direction doesn't make any sense.
Yep. And advisory.
Everybody agree?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Okay. I will see what I can get set up and how soon I can get it set up.
All right. And when we do, we have to have our act really well together.
We have to what?
We have to have our act really well together. We have
Oh,
to
I
have
agree.
a very short, sweet presentation with the right numbers to justify our stance.
Yes, Michelle?
This question is actually for Lee. The Town Hall Building Committee is scheduled to come before advisory Thursday evening. With all this being said, do you think it's premature that they come before you this Thursday until there is a definitive direction from the select board? Or would it be a good opportunity to get more questions out there prior to a select board meeting?
I think it's always good. I think it's always good to get the advisory board, no matter where it is, at least they get involved in it and they start to think about it.
Okay,
I'm just saying, I think it wouldn't hurt at all. You know,
Okay.
people start, we haven't heard anything about it.
okay,
So I think it's good to get us informed, even though it may be another direction, but I think that's the way it should be done. That's the way I look at it. So
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Well, should Capital try to go before advisory on Thursday to explain our thinking to them? I don't know what your agenda looks like, so.
I'm trying to think. Well, I think it's mostly the building town hall, I think. Let me just check. Wait a second. Let me look. Yep. VOTEC and town hall.
Well, that would be an appropriate time, wouldn't it?
Certainly would be.
Could we pull, can you hear me okay? I just shifted a microphone. Hopefully you can hear me
Yeah.
better now. Are we prepared to go in 3 days? Could we pull a presentation together?
Well, we'll have to be. I mean, I don't think we can wait very long on this. I don't think we can futz around with it for several weeks. I think we have to get it together and go.
Okay, so what will we include in the presentation?
Well, I think we need to have the impact of doing town hall on our annual debt service,
Mm-hmm.
what effect that will have on the capital stabilization fund and the 10-year capital plan. I mean, really, the capital stabilization fund relies on the 10-year capital plan to look forward and see what our funding is going to be. I have a projection from Don Piat on funding for the capital stabilization fund going forward, but it's not, there's not a heck of a lot of change in how much money is going into it. So I think you have to assume it's going to be the same. He has roughly 2 million. I mean, it goes up and down, but slightly, but it's roughly 2 million a year. And what effect that's going to have on future town projects.
So what we're saying is we need information on the funding required per year for how many years, and that's debt service.
Yeah,
What the impact is to the capital stabilization fund each year for how many years.
yeah,
We need to set
yes,
a standard for how many years. And then how all that factors into the 10-year capital plan. Did I get that right?
yes. I mean, that's it. Yes, Michelle?
Can I ask that one other thing be looked at, just so when we're looking at this as a committee as a whole, that you look at what number you're comfortable funding over a period of time. So there's that target, is it 8 million? Is it 6 million? Is it 10 million? So I think it's important to have that number as well. I'm not sure if you can come up with that by Thursday, but as you think through it, I think that would be extremely helpful.
Is it, referring to the amount of debt service on the town hall project? Is that what not any other stuff?
Well, yes, how it would impact everything as a whole. So can you fund
Yeah, what
only
it means-
5 million without putting off their future capital requests? Can you only fund 6 million, 3 million? I don't know what that number is, and I think it would be helpful to know.
Well, if you're getting 2 million a year, you can roughly fund 2 million through debt service and or cash. And I look at requests, we've got just shy of 5 million this year, 6 million next year, 19 million in 24, 4 million in 25, 5.5 million in 26. So it just keeps chugging along beyond our capability. And that doesn't include town hall. So you add town hall into it.
And that's our message.
Yeah,
And something's got to give. And what we're suggesting is a much more frugal approach to spending each year.
well, I will plan on
We're suggesting that, but we're also suggesting
the
to,
advisory. Oops, sorry, Susan, didn't mean to cut you off.
no, I'm just reiterating a little bit, Mike, we are suggesting that the frugalness is important, but we're also suggesting that we need to really look at the number that makes the most sense to spend on this. Have those different examples at 10, at 8, at 12. What does that leave us with? And I think it's really 3 slides. Because Sam, those numbers you were just throwing out about requests every year, they're pretty much 5 million, right? That's kind of the going thing going forward.
Yeah, it's the requests every year are essentially beyond our capability to fund them.
Right, so I don't think we need to get into the weeds to have the conversation
No,
about like what makes up that.
There all
5 million
night.
there. Just very broad stroke numbers. I mean, this is it's a pretty obvious, picture when you look at it that way.
So Susan, when you said 3 slides, is that 1 slide for each price point? Or what are your thoughts?
Excuse me, Mike?
The question for Susan.
No, I think it goes back to a little bit of what Brian was saying before about, we know we have, if we use this financial discipline, we're going to say we only have, is 2 million the number we're going for? Because I think someone threw out 3 million earlier.
Well, that's what they're budgeting.
Okay, so 2 million's the budget, for the capital stabilization fund. And in the 3 or however many scenarios you want to throw out for the price of town hall, you can
Okay.
show how much money that's going to take out of that nut. And that leaves X, and the funding requests annually are 5.
Right.
So,
Also, how much we already have obligated out of to service and debt service are things we bonded.
Right.
Or committed to bond that just haven't hit yet. For example, the Border Street Bridge,
Yeah,
Right.
right? We've got an $800,000 commitment out there. I think we've spent 50 of it so far. So that's not bonded yet. We're not paying principal and interest on it yet, but you know, that money is effectively spent, and that debt service is something you can count on unless we pull a rabbit out of the hat, which we're trying to do separately.
right. Agreed.
So, look, the other, the other lever that you can pull on this that we haven't really discussed at length tonight, perhaps this is something that people need to start thinking about, is that if the appropriations into capital are insufficient to cover the demands on capital, then, perhaps they need to simply increase their commitment to capital in order to cover these requests.
Mhm.
I mean, we can only spend what they give us, right? So, every department wants more money. I don't think we particularly care as long as we're not asked to spend more than we're given.
But we're asked every year to spend more than we're given.
Right. And that clearly doesn't work. I mean, it's
And
worked for the
they-
past few years because we've bonded little, nits and gnats. But, when you actually start getting into, serial bonding year after year after year, you bankrupt the fund with or without town hall.
Yeah, agreed.
So, the other lever they can pull is just simply saying, okay, we need to be more committed to investing in capital and up the number. I mean, it's their choice, but we can only spend what we're given.
Right. And said another way, in order to pay for town hall out of the operating budget, then we need to reduce all the other line items to squeeze out more money for the town hall. Which-
Or appropriate more money to capital, one or the other.
Right.
Right. Yeah, basically increase the amount you appropriate to capital by the cost of the town hall's debt service.
Could do that too.
And then you're par with where we are.
You could do that too. One other thing you could think about, and I, quick question for Lee, perhaps, if we have 2.3 million in free cash this year, which exceeds the number that Sam and I had heard, I guess the question is, where's that money going to go in terms of the appropriations of the free cash flow? Should we be taking a million of it or more and putting it into a town hall fund to make a down payment on this so that we don't have to bond it at all?
Yeah.
And that's just the fiscal 2020 free cash flow, right? By the time we get to fall special town meeting, there's going to be free cash from fiscal 2021 ready for distribution. You could perhaps throw another slug of money into that fund, right? And now you've, a million here, a million there, pretty soon you're talking real money, right? In terms of, reducing the amount that's being bonded.
Well, I think they're increasing OPEB.
That's good too.
I'm just saying that. That's what it.
Yeah.
Is it, I mean, I know capital, I know they've got a big number, coming to capital as well, like 750 grand, but 2.3 is a big number. Lee, where do you know offhand what chunks are being appropriated where?
It's you got to look at the town meeting articles. You'll see it.
Okay.
I was only skimming. I just skimmed it. I didn't get it. I just skimmed it on the screen.
Okay.
Okay.
But I think if the capital budget wants to come with the advisory board, so we should get on the agenda. Am I correct?
Yes.
Who goes on the agenda? Want me to give Rob Hillman a call this evening and see if he'll answer my? I mean, I don't think I should be in. I'm not I get involved in this thing, but
I would ask Michelle to go to Chris Senior and have us added, have the select board add us, and that we have to post our meeting.
So is this two asks? One, get in touch with Rob so you can get on advisory Thursday. And the second ask would be to Diane Kennedy to have a joint meeting with the select board.
Yes.
And is the select board joint meeting also include advisory?
Excuse me?
Would the joint meeting with the select board be capital advisory and select board? I just wanna make sure I have my facts straight.
That would make the most sense.
Would that be Thursday night? That's what, we're talking about Thursday night, aren't we?
No, we're talking about a meeting with the selectmen.
Right, but you were talking also about.
But I think capital has to meet with advisory first.
Okay, that's what I
Make
thought.
sure we're all on the same wavelength.
Right, so that's this Thursday. I'm gonna ask Rob if he can squeeze you on the agenda for Thursday.
Yeah,
And then,
because you've got town hall on there anyway, right?
right, Town Hall Building Committee, but then I will send a note to Diane and ask for a joint meeting with the select board.
Okay.
So does that mean on Thursday night, we want to have this mini presentation available for advisory and vet it with them before we go before the selectmen?
I think
I don't
that's.
think so.
I think that's the intention, right?
Yeah, it's daunting to have a defensible presentation with good numbers in it in that short amount of time. I'm assuming we would need Don Pyatt to help us construct these financial spreadsheets.
I don't know if you really need all those numbers. I just think educate the advisory board, that's all. And then come up later, maybe
Okay.
with the selectmen with the numbers. That's the only reason I thought it would be good to have the capital budget there, just so the fact that, you're educating the advisory board that, if we do this, it could be this, it could be that, but we'll get the numbers in the near future. That's only my point was.
Okay, well, good. Thanks for that.
Well, I still think we can use, we don't have to get down to every little item and every little penny. We can use some broad strokes. The theory's the same, the outcome's the same in terms of the concept.
Okay.
And we know historically, 2 million has been what we've been given. It's not difficult to calculate what the annual debt service payment is going to be. We just have to decide as a group, what we want to say those numbers are. Is it 6 million, 8 million, 10 million, 12 million? Like what are we using? And I guess we keep the interest rate the same, Sam, and do 20 and 30 years like you did already.
Well, yeah, at this point, I'd use for town hall, the 14 million total and 4 million out of CPC, 10 million to be funded with debt service through the operating budget. Now, if it comes in lower, that's good. That's no problem. But what we're currently looking at, this is what the picture looks like. And if you throw that debt service into the town's overall budget, including capital stabilization fund, here's what starts to happen.
Right.
And it's not sustainable.
You have to assume some average amount of spending that you need to have in addition to the debt service, the total debt service, Sam. So if we have been typically spending a couple of million, including the debt service of 500,000 or so a year, somewhere in that range, and you're adding 800 to that, you got a 1.3, right?
Yeah.
If you say what you really need to have is a clean 2 million above that, then you've got to figure out 3.3 million. So, you can almost, these are easy numbers to figure out. And at that point, you have to say, where's that going to come from? Or are we going to drop things out of this equation? That's all there is to it. It's not very hard to figure this out. And all you have to do is layer in all of those, just make sure people know how many projects and how much they're potentially going to cost us and what they are. The problem with those projects is we won't do them all. We just aren't going to do them all. That's very clear. But at least if you put them in, it says to people, these are undoable, even under the most optimistic scenario. So that's how you look at this whole thing. So
Yeah, no, it's very, I think it's pretty simple.
yeah, you just layer in all the projects.
Capital plan.
Yeah, the capital plan.
Capital plan that you assume is somewhat accurate. It's not going to be perfect, but it's close enough.
Right.
And those are your demands. And here's the income you have to
To support it.
those demands.
Yeah, that's right.
and you can't do it.
And you can't do it. And then what number does it take in order for us to do it? So now you say, okay, the operating budget's going to have to support another $1.5 million, $2 million to the capital budget committee over its traditional contribution. You know, then you begin to say, okay, now I can see my way through this thing, right?
No, I'd almost say any big long-term project that you want to do, you're going to have to provide that additional debt service funding into the capital stabilization fund.
That's the way to look at it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And that will allow the stabilization fund to work the way you want it to work.
Yeah, that's right.
So Sam, do you feel comfortable just presenting that message Thursday night?
Yeah,
Do we need
I
to
do.
put anything together, or are you comfortable just?
Well, I'm happy to have anybody else along, but I feel comfortable with it.
Okay.
I know, Mark, that doesn't help you guys much right now, but we got to get this figured out. Anybody
Okay.
else have anything else on town hall?
No.
No, I guess just the takeaway message for Mark is just please understand that a lot of people working really hard trying to figure out how to make this fit.
I think the committee's done a great job, the town hall building committee.
Mhm.
And we do.
What you have is great, but we've got to figure out how we fund this thing.
Right.
No, we respect that, and I think that's fundamentally. I mean, I'm sure there's tweaks and adjustments that can be made along the way here. I mean, we're only into the first phase of design through this, but you know, I think the reality is that slide that we had in the presentation. This is not a $10 million job,
Yeah.
and that was put there purposely because there's not enough value engineering to do what we have. The whole thing would require a drastic reprogramming. That's not tweaking. That's a complete new design. And we just can't get there with the program. That'd be a significant change. So, but we appreciate everyone's effort, certainly.
Well, thank you. Michelle, I'm going to assume that the schools have never showed up. Is that correct?
Sam, I saw an email late this afternoon that said she had gathered most of her responses, but was going to speak to some other people tomorrow. I just saw that kind of in the headline. Didn't sound like they were coming tonight.
Okay, well, you know more than I do. Last correspondence I had was a couple of days ago. So,
Now this, Brian, you're right, it was at 5:15 tonight.
I'd like to move on and see if we can get some minutes approved. Is that a possibility?
Sure.
So moved.
Sure.
Mark, thank you so much. Unless you want to
Thanks,
help. us
Mark.
approve
Thank you,
minutes.
Mark.
Take care.
The first set of minutes are December 14th. And I think you all have these.
Yep.
Anybody have any additions, corrections, amendments?
Nope.
I just wanted to say one thing, that if you're gonna come Thursday night, it'd just be a small group, right? With you and maybe Ralph or Mike. Am I right? The whole committee won't be there on Thursday night.
Correct.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I don't think we need everybody.
Okay. I just wanted to, I'm talking to Rob right now. Okay.
Oh, so I just sent him an email, so it's not a joint meeting then? It's not considered a joint meeting?
I think we've changed.
On Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think we.
Yeah, well, I think I will just have one other person go with me, and that way we won't have a quorum,
Right.
which is safe.
Well, just let me play devil's advocate for a second. I mean, is there any reason not to post it and have people listen in?
No,
There's no reason not to. Just trying to keep the meeting manageable.
Fair
for-
enough.
for advisory. And I think it'd be cool if we were there in force to back up our chair and his statement. And if Sam, if you want like Brian or Ralph there, don't look to me to back you up.
Who
because
wants to go?
I'm green. I certainly want to attend, but I don't.
I mean, I'm happy to have anybody with me. I'm not concerned exactly who it is, but if somebody really wants to participate, I'd love to have them come.
Let me share a thought. I think that Ralph provides, a value, frankly, that I probably do not, which is his insight into the growth in the operating budget and the positions over the years, and his, incredible depth of experience, both as a selectman and as a member of the advisory committee. It's just a perspective I can't speak from. So my instinct is, if the message here is universal financial restraint across all disciplines, I just maybe better coming from him than me. I don't know how you feel about that, Ralph, but.
Well, I can certainly provide the historical perspective and how we got here, and what is the evolution of where we are today. I have a very clear understanding of that. It unfortunately, coming from me, I don't think it's going to be well received, to be honest with you.
Happy to do it too. I mean, either way.
Yeah, I think it's probably better that a couple of us are willing to do that. I'm willing to say exactly what happened because I certainly feel as though I understand it, having been part of so darn many committees in this town for so many years, and how different I see it now. But that is a very tough message to tell people.
Right.
That goes right to an individual, unfortunately. Be realistic here. We have changed a lot.
And that might hurt your credibility too.
There's no question
Okay,
about it.
so the thought maybe we just focus on the capital issue, which is there's not enough room for the fund in the fund and in the current appropriation for big projects. And if you want to put big projects into the fund, we can't be putting other leverage on the fund, first of all. And secondly, you probably have to gross up the fund for whatever big project you're sticking in.
Yeah,
That's like reality, not personal.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I can certainly do that, either or Michael, given your experience coming off the committee, you're welcome to do it too. And I'm happy to do it. I just want to think out loud as to who the other person is.
Lee will tell you that I always wound up on the short end of votes.
Okay.
So I don't
know.
know.
He was the best. He was the best.
Realism is lonely.
Right. Speaking truth.
Question is, did Michael leave the advisory committee on good terms with all the new members?
I don't know most of the new members.
Were they pushing him out the door to get rid of him?
Too late now, you got me.
Oh, we're happy to have you.
Happy to have you.
Yeah, but let me just jump back in. Sam, even though there may only be 2 speakers for the Capital Budget Committee, it seems to me that most of the Capital Budget Committee it's a point of solidarity to see that all of us are in the same spot, okay?
Agreed.
We don't have to have all
Yeah.
speakers, but solidarity says we all show up with our faces, okay?
Agreed.
No, that's clear. Everybody's on the same wavelength in this discussion.
Okay, so we should post it as a joint meeting is the conclusion.
Yes. So
Okay,
we
Two
we all
speakers,
set with
but
that?
multiple attendees.
We're back to the original game plan.
Okay.
We're all set then?
You good, Michelle? Thank you for being patient.
We
with us.
move on to
No,
minutes.
that's fine. I did send that to Rob. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with Lee because he just spoke to Rob. So I want to make sure we're all communicating the same thing. So Lee, I think there's been a change of heart and there's going to be now a joint meeting requested with all the members of Capital with
Okay.
the advisory.
Okay.
Okay, so they don't want, can they do that in time for Thursday night?
48 hours. They do it tomorrow morning. They can do it. But we got to check with Rob again because he left me with the impression 1 or 2 members would be great. But I can't see any problem with everybody on there because that's how I look at it. It's not a problem. We'll listen to the
Yeah.
town building.
Okay.
One or two presenting is the answer.
Well, definitely Brian and I'll go, and then if it becomes an open meeting, we'll let everybody know, and you're all welcome to come.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
I'll call him back.
Sense?
And
Yep.
Michelle, I'll call him back, but you really should be working on it, not just me. So
I did. I sent him an email already requesting.
a joint meeting.
Yes, I did. That was the email I sent.
Okay, let's go with that then. Okay, and we can still, okay.
Well,
right.
we'll wait until it gets posted before it's official.
Okay.
We don't want to have any illegal meetings.
Oh,
We might get called on it. Okay, I'm going to go back to approving minutes if we
Okay,
can.
do you want a motion to approve the minutes of December 14th, Sam?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I move the minutes of December 14th, 2020.
Second.
Okay, we have a second?
I think Michael
Second.
seconded. If he didn't, I will.
Second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, it has to be a roll call. Susan,
Aye.
Ralph,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Sam, aye. Okay, we got the 14th done. Next set is January 4th.
I'll move the meeting of, the minutes of the meeting of January 4th, 2021.
Second.
Who seconded it?
Mike.
Okay. Roll call. Sam, aye. Susan,
Aye.
Ralph,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
great. Next are the minutes of January 25th.
In the minutes of January 25th, we approved the minutes of December 14th.
Oh, we did?
Yes, we did.
All right.
5-0.
Well, we've double approved them, so they
Yes.
must be really official now.
Yes.
Well, how about the minutes of January 25th?
Yeah, we need to, let me just double check February 1st.
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't. No, so we should vote on January 25th right now. And I move that we adopt the minutes of January 25th.
Second.
Roll
A quick-
call.
A quick question on those, and I don't want to do any significant changes. The only thing that struck me was that we have a, under the engine 2 corrosion repair, we've got a projected replacement in fiscal 34 of $1 million. I don't remember it being that high for that engine if we had to replace it, but maybe I'm completely wrong on that one point.
I trust Susan's notes.
That's what the,
If-
That's
if-
what the
if
chief
he said
gave us,
million, It's
so I-
there, man.
you know, he
Okay.
may be factoring in inflation and
Yeah.
all
Okay.
kinds of stuff.
Okay,
That's
I mean,
fiscal.
that's over
34.
10 years out.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, let's do a roll call on the January 25th minutes. Sam, yes. Susan,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
minutes of February 1st.
I move we adopt the minutes of February 1st, 2021.
We have a
Second.
second?
It's me. Second.
Roll call, Sam, yes. Susan,
Yes.
Ralph,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Michael?
Yes.
I don't know why they approved.
We're just being ornery.
And I think the next one we have are the 8th of February.
Those were not in the email.
I did not see those either. But let me
You
see if I
haven't,
can find them.
okay.
Susan, did you send them?
No.
I think you sent them out, right, Susan? Who knows?
Jeez, I don't remember.
Well, at least we got 4 sets of minutes done.
Right.
I won't push it any further.
Yeah.
We're into the right year.
Yeah. And the town clerk's not yelling at me yet, so I guess we're okay.
Good.
I will post a meeting for next week. I'll have the schools on the agenda. Hopefully they can get it done by then. And then I want to start a discussion on what we're going to recommend for annual town meeting.
Okay.
Since we have so much money to spend and so few requests, we can do them all, right? And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. If anybody wants to go to bed.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, Sam, aye. Susan,
Aye.
Ralph?
Aye.
I saw you say aye. Brian,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Michelle, do you have anything you want to add?
I just want to thank Michelle for putting in a long night on a Monday night. Thank you.
Thank you very
Really
much.
appreciate it.